Hi, Jack Ryan here with the Law and Best Practices and the Critical Tasks in Law Enforcement Operations. This is part of an ongoing series where we talk about the high-risk critical tasks, a number of different areas, use of force, vehicle pursuits, dealing with the mentally ill, domestic violence, persons of diminished capacity, and we could go on, care, custody, control, and restraint of prisoners. But these are a little bit longer than our roll call series. And we hope to bring you both the law and best practice and keep you updated on what's happening throughout the country through this series. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully you'll find it useful for you. This week I want to talk about an issue related to investigatory or Terry stops, those stops that are authorized when an officer believes that there is criminal activity afoot based on some articulable facts. The case that I want to talk about has just been decided. It's an actual lawsuit against a police officer who made a stop of an individual based on a radio broadcast which provided a vague description. And the question is, how good does the description have to be before we're justified in making a stop? Before I get there, I think it's important to talk about a U.S. Supreme Court case, Reed versus Georgia, which kind of sets the background and the support for this, in which the DZ versus Buell case actually discusses. In Reed, you've got a DEA agent. He's working at the Atlanta airport. And he's making observations of people getting off a plane from Fort Lauderdale. Essentially, you have two guys get off, they're carrying shoulder bags. They make their way out to the terminal. At one point, while the DEA agent's following them, one of these guys is clearly in the lead. They say the shoulder bags are, I guess, almost identical. But the guy in the lead keeps kind of looking over his shoulder to see where the other guy is behind him. And when they get into the terminal, the officer stops them, asks for consent to search their bags. They give consent, but then one of the individuals, Reed, takes off running. Cocaine is discovered as a result. Reed seeks suppression on the grounds that the DEA agent had no right to stop him to begin with. Now, the drug courier profile, the two factors really, and the court says this, the Supreme Court, they say really there were only two factors, right? Factor number one was the look over the shoulder. Factor number two was that these two individuals are flying into Atlanta from a known drug city where drugs pass through. So that's factor number two. In analyzing the case, the Supreme Court said, hey, look, this one isn't enough. Because, all right, you've got the look over the shoulder. That's really your only factor, because the second factor, flying from Fort Lauderdale into Atlanta, would really take in too many people that could be stopped. It's almost a random stop, because you could stop anybody who flew from Fort Lauderdale to Atlanta and who maybe looked over their shoulder or looked in the wrong direction. So the court said, you know, when you use that factor, flying from Fort Lauderdale into Atlanta, that's not good enough because it's overly broad and would allow law enforcement to stop too many individuals. Now, the DZ case, a little bit different. In DZ versus Buell, you have a situation whereby a woman reports that there was a burglary and a suspect in her house, and she describes him as a young African-American male. He's wearing cargo shorts and a dark-colored shirt. She makes this report to the police. That gets broadcast over the radio, and in fact, a short time later, an officer actually stops an individual. This woman is brought by, the one who reported it, our reporting party is brought by. A show-up is done. She says, no, that's not him. Short time later, an officer sees another African-American male who she believes fits the description on a bicycle. She puts that out over the radio. She tries to catch up to him, and he gets away. Now, important factor here, because if he flees and that can be determined, then by all means, now we've got several factors. Now we've got fitting the description, and then we've got flight. That would certainly be enough. The officers concede that he actually, this young man, this 13-year-old DZ, never actually saw the officer and didn't know the officer was trying to catch him. However, Officer Buell, what he sees, now he doesn't know all this. Some of this is after the fact kind of stuff. What Officer Buell sees is he knows that this other officer tried to catch up to the guy on a bike. When he gets in the area, he sees that officer running back to her car. So his thought process is, and his sphere of information, his drops of water in our measuring cup of reasonable suspicion, is that now we've got description, we've got an officer trying to catch, and we've got a subject trying to evade. Hey, Officer Buell catches up to this young man and sees him go into a driveway. It turns out that it's this 13-year-old's house. Again, Officer Buell doesn't know that. Okay, and so what Buell makes the stop, and a show-up is done, and it's determined that, again, this is not the subject. And in fact, they get a more detailed description that says that this African-American male that was in the house, the burglary suspect, was actually a 6 foot, 6'1", something like that, medium complected, probably 17, 18 years old, certainly not 13. And so after the fact, they get a much more detailed description that would show that this could not be the young man who was in that house. Bottom line is, the court examines how much of a description is enough, and really concludes that, you've got to have a description that doesn't allow you to randomly stop people. So again, it goes back to this Reed idea. If the description is so vague that it would take in so many people, then we're really not stopping with a nexus to this individual. Okay, I guess a couple of examples. If we were in an area that was predominantly African American citizens, and somebody puts out a description of hey, a black male just knocked me down and stole my bicycle, then obviously that would be not enough. If you were to start stopping simply African American males, it wouldn't be enough because it would be too vague. So again, I think really the learning points from this case, and again, the court does find in favor of this officer. I think that's important to point out. But it was based on great documentation. So I think that's the learning point in this case. One, the court said, all right, so there's this description. But that was not all Buell knew. And again, remember, on all these Fourth Amendment things, 20/20 hindsight does not play into it. What else did Buell know? Buell also knew that, in fact, he believed and reasonably believed that this subject had fled from this female officer. He believed that the subject was trying to evade when he turned into the driveway. In fact, Buell put out over the radio, hey, he's cutting through yards. So it showed that he actually believed that this subject was trying to evade him. So when you put the factors together, the court concluded that there was in fact reasonable suspicion to make this stop. So again, one of the important pieces is we should try to get detailed descriptions when we're the first officer on the scene. That's going to protect other officers. That's going to make every stop that much better. We know sometimes that crime victims and witnesses don't get it right. I understand that. But again, we still have to be in the right detail in order that the description isn't such that we could just stop basically everybody that we see. Document the other factors, things like flight, things like evasive conduct, any other factors that would also support, in addition to the description, the stop. I want to thank you for joining us for this legal update, part of an ongoing series of the Legal and Liability Risk Management Institute. And as a final note, thank you for all you do out there, and please be careful.